Okay. Turn off the TV for one. Okay. Now I am sanding the back of the ring with the text on it. So the idea is to make this flat and smooth so the solder adheres nicely. So you take a piece, I'm using a piece of 320 sandpaper, wrapping it around a stick, and I'm just gently sanding the back while it's on a piece of wood on my bench pin to make sure that it's fairly smooth and roughed up. And I don't want any high spots. That'll hold the rest of the metal up off of contact with the backing. And you see how the ink is coming off where it was written on. That shows that it's getting smoother. Now we want to use a slightly coarser grit for this, because we want to make sure that there's plenty of grab for the solder later. Now sandpaper, you can sand in any direction. Though most people will use it like a file and just go one direction, so they can control the lines, so they have a better idea of what's being taken off. Okay. Now this is one little spot there needs to be done, and one over here. I don't know if you can see this on there, but there's a little spot there that needs to be touched up. So let's wrap this around again. So we get some fresh paper, and just go over it again. And that is suitable. It's smooth to the touch, but you can see that it is slightly roughed up, from the grit of the sandpaper. So that will give a nice adhesion with the solder. And the front has a few scratches, but that's okay because we will be polishing that later. And what we want to do now is take the backing piece, which is 25.25 millimeters thick, which I believe is about 30 or 32 gauge, and you want to prepare that by sanding it. Now, because I cut this with snips, there's a little flexiness to it. So the snips tend to make it warp a little bit. And that's probably from work hardening, but we will get rid of that when we heat it to solder it, because it will anneal and flatten a little bit when we solder it. And the weight of the ring on top is going to also help it flatten out. this is the back side because there's a little raising. We probably want to do the other side. Now this is just snipped out and lightly filed, so it's a little out of round. It's a little bigger than the ring that's being soldered onto it. That'll give me a lip to set solder to draw underneath the piece. This could use a little bit of flattening. So we're going to take a small flat metal block, put the metal on there, and we're going to use a hammer. This one isn't too polished, so we don't want to use that one. That is very polished. And of course this one needs polished. You can see that this one is near polished or close to it. It needs to be refinished, but there's no marks. So as a hammer on the copper, no marks will be left in here. So this is the pin out, so this sits flat. And now doing this stretches the copper, so this actually makes it bow a little more. So because of that slight bowing, okay, now the edge is flat. It's nicely flat. So we can put the block away, put the pin back in, and continue with a little touch-up sanding. And sometimes the best tool to use is your fingers. Okay. And that is suitable for soldering. Yeah, not quite. There's a little darkness there. The idea is when you solder, you want to solder the bright, shiny metal. No dull metal allowed. The dullness comes from things that are on the metal, such as oils from your skin, dust, things from the atmosphere or that were picked up off the bench, ink, anything. You don't want that on the metal. Also, a lot of the darkness comes from oxidation, especially copper. Oxidizes very quickly. So you want to make sure you get that oxidation off so you have a nice bright metal to solder to. And we are set. So we solder those together, and then we move to the next step. But the first step here is we want to make sure that this is clean, so we go wash this. And then we add resist into the letters so that nothing comes up to the letters when we solder and fills them in. Because they're thin enough, they will fill in.